Welcome to Crime in Court. This is the Delphi trial transcript we're reading through, and today we are on the state's case part 4. And as you can see from the thumbnail, Mitchell Catron is with the Carroll County Sheriff's Department, and he is a deputy with Carroll County. And then we will also hear from Stephen Mullen, who is a former Delphi chief of police. So those are the two individuals that we will hear testimony from in today's episode or stream. So please hit the like button. I apologize. Number one, I forgot to mention, I apologize for a little bit of a hiatus. I have been fighting, recovering, healing, hurting from a migraine that has been lasting for the last 4 days. So, um, really haven't been feeling up to reading, and light hurts. So, even just looking at the screen and reading hurts. Talking is exhausting. So I'm going to have to go slower probably than usual. So just letting you know. And my energy level is like, but I didn't want to make you guys wait another day. So let's get started. Please hit the like button. Here we go. Mr. McLeland for the state says judge, and we're picking up right where we left off, which was the end of the directed or the end of Anna Williams, and we also did listen to Derek German's testimony. Derek German is the father of Libby, one of the decedents in this case, and Anna Williams, the mother of the decedent in the other decedent in this case, Abby Williams and Libby German. So here we go. Mr. McLeland says, Judge, the state of Indiana would call Officer Mitch Catron. He's coming up now, Judge. Judge, while we're waiting for Deputy Catron to come up, I've had the Steve Mullen put in a zip drive to the computer. It's going to be a map photo on the screen. The parties are willing to stipulate to that. If the court would allow, I'd like to use it for Deputy Catron, and then I can have Mrs. Williams mark it as State's Exhibit 5, I believe, afterwards. The court says, sure, you're at 5. She's so nice, isn't she? Sure, Mr. McClelland, whatever you want. Then I want to make sure everybody can see this. The court says, come on up, deputy. The Mr. McClelland says, thank you, Judge. I apologize. Court says, that's all right. Deputy Catron, please. He, I'm sure, gestures him to the witness stand, and the witness is sworn in. Direct examination of Deputy Mitchell Catron begins. All right, so Mr. McClelland for the state says, will you state your name, please? Mitchell Catron. And how are you employed? With the Carroll County Sheriff's Office. And why can't I highlight here? There we go. Sorry, that was weird. Okay. Sorry. All right. So he works with the Carroll County Sheriff's Office. And Deputy Catron, I'm going to ask you to speak up as best that you can so that everybody can hear you. So we're having a little bit of issues with the microphone. Sometimes it's amplifying and sometimes it's not. And so just use your best outside voice for me. Does that work? That'll work. Why is it that every single courthouse in America has audio issues and can't get their audio to pick up the witness so that everyone in the courthouse can hear? I don't understand. All right, you're employed with the Carroll County Sheriff's Department. Is that correct? That is correct. And how long have you been employed there? 12 years. And did you have to go through special training or schooling to be a law enforcement officer? I did. Indiana Law Enforcement Academy. And any other special training or education to be a law enforcement officer? We also go through a field training program, the hiring process. And have you spent your entire career as a law enforcement officer with Carroll County? No, I was a reserve deputy in Clinton County for 2 years prior to that. And so have you been with Carroll County for 10 years? 12 years. 12 years. Okay. And have you been in and around Carroll County that entire 12 years? Yes. And would you say you're familiar with that area? Yes. I'm showing you what's been stipulated to, and it's been marked as States Exhibit 5, and it's a digital map that's on the TV screen here. Can you see that? I can. And can you describe the area that can you describe the area that map displays? Yes. That's County Road 300 North on the top end there. This, the Hoosier Heartland, the multi-lane going at an angle on the left hand of the screen. Judge, can I have the witness approach the map so that he can be able to point out some things for the jury so they better understand the lay of the land? You may. Deputy Catron, do you mind coming down and as you identify landmarks or markers on the map, would you be willing to use this pointer to point those out for me, please? Sure. And so you were talking, where's the Hoosier Heartland? The court says, could you step to the side? Mr. McClelland says, oh, I'm sorry. The court says, no. Mr. McClelland, can you step? The court says, one side or the other so that the jury can see. Mr. McClelland says, oh, okay, sorry. The witness says, good. Mr. McClelland says, can the jury still see? Okay. How about up here, deputy? I think there's a microphone close enough. Make sure you use your best outside voice so that we can all hear. Okay, I'll stand right here. Okay. Deputy Catron, can you point out the Hoosier Heartland? That's the Hoosier Heartland right there. This two-lane highway. Then let's get oriented in direction north, south, east, west. Is the top of the screen north? This is north to the top of the screen. Okay, and then east and west is to the left and the right of the screen, correct? Yep. And where's the city of Delphi? It is located over this way. I can't see it on the map. That's fine. So on the left hand of the screen? Correct. Just off of the screen? Correct. And you pointed out the Hoosier Heartland. Is that correct? Yes. And where is this area, where is the area commonly referred to as the Freedom Bridge? The Freedom Bridge would be this bridge crossing right here. And it crosses the Hoosier Heartland? That is correct. Ms. Diener says they're not seeing. Mr. McClelland says, okay, the jury's not seeing the pointer. Is that what? Okay. We're going to go the old-fashioned way. We're going to use your finger, okay? Okay. So, Hoosier Heartland, he indicates. And Hoosier Heartland. Okay. Freedom Bridge, he indicates. Okay. This is north. And Mr. McClelland says, let's do this. Oop, maybe. Okay. Let's kind of backtrack a little bit. Where's the city of Delphi? City of Delphi would be over here. All right. Thank you, Deputy. Freedom Bridge again. Can you point that out? Yep. Freedom Bridge crosses here. And we've referred to a place in prior testimony, the old CPS building. Can you point that out? Yes, it would have been in this area. Well, it's still there in this map, I believe. Right there. Okay. And we've also talked about an area called the Mears entrance. Can you find that on the map? This would be this entrance right here. And where does that entrance lead? So this goes to the trails. And the Freedom Bridge, is that connected to the trails? It is. Can you show me on the map where it's connected to the trails? The Freedom Bridge crosses here and comes across here, and this whole trail comes along here to this Mears entrance. And if you enter the Mears entrance and go to the east, Where does that trail lead to? It goes to the Monon High Bridge. And the Monon High Bridge is where? Right here. And what is the body of water that crosses underneath the Monon High Bridge? That would be the Deer Creek. And can you run your finger along the Deer Creek? Deer Creek here. I know some of these questions are silly, but I want to make sure the jury has a good understanding of what we're talking about. Sure. We've also talked about an area called the Hoosier Harvest Store business. Are you familiar with that? I am. Can you point that out on the map? It would be this business right here. And what is this business? What are they in the business of? So, the Hoosier Harvest Store, my understanding is they have those big blue silos that store silage for cattle, but they also have storage sheds along here as well. And those long buildings, are those the storage sheds? They are. Okay, I want to take you back to February. I'm going to ask you to stay at the map because I'm going to have you point out some things. I wanted you to stay to the my right of the map as best as you can so the jury can see the map as you're speaking. I want to take you back to February 17th of 2000, sorry, February 13th of 2017. Were you on duty that day? Like, he gets the date wrong. And he probably got the year because he was probably about to say 2017, but then he cut himself off and said, no, wait, sorry, February 13th. But are you kidding me? Anyways, he should know the date, like, ingrained in his head. Anyways, I want to take you back to February 13th of 2017. Were you on duty that day? I was. And what shift were you working? Day shift, which is 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And do you recall getting a call from dispatch around 5:15 p.m. on that day? I do. Can you tell me about that? Dispatch advised that there was a gentleman on the phone wanting to get assistance from us because a couple kids were missing or not showing up where they should be. And do you know who the gentleman on the phone was? At that time, no. Did you answer the phone? I did. Did you make contact with the person on the other end? Yes. And who was it? It ended up being Mr. Patty. And what information did you get from Mr. Patty? Simply said that he was supposed to pick up these two kids. Don't they mean Derek German? I guess they're referring to him as Mr. Patty, even though he has a different last name than the Pattys. Okay. Confusing or whatever, but so simply said that he was supposed to pick up these two kids at a location around the Freedom Bridge there. They weren't there. He was getting concerned because they had looked around a little bit and they're at a point where they want to reach out for more help to help look. Did he indicate where the girls were supposed to be picked up at? I don't recall. Okay, did you find out the names of the girls at that point? Yes. And were they? That's terrible that you have to change your tense there because you're a dumb prosecutor. And it's just like a blatant reminder to the family. They're not here. Anyways, and who were they? They were identified as Abby Williams and Libby German at the time. Okay, after you got that information, what did you do next? I went out first. I either had dispatch or myself announce it if of what I was doing, what the call was. I then drove out to this lane, and he indicates on the map. This is, I believe, 625 west, if I recall. I could be a little off on that, which goes to a private drive, which is right here, which goes underneath this. I'm going to slow you down for a bit. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to make the picture a little bit bigger so we can see what you're talking about. So point out 625 on the map. So down here is County Road 625 West. And then right here at this right angle, this turns into a private drive. And all this here is a privately owned and a private driveway and that loops all around the woods, and then it goes under the Monenhigh Bridge right here. And I don't want to be elementary, but I want to make sure everybody understands this white line is that the private drive? Yes, it is. And are there any? Mr. McClellan says, I'm sorry, Judge. It's a little awkward. Are there any houses on that private drive? Not until there is a house here, but there are no other houses until this one here. And who lives there? That would be Brad Weber. Remember that name because he will come up again. Mr. McClellan says, Judge, can I check? Can the jury still see everything okay? Okay. I just want to make sure before we go too far, or before we go too far in this, Judge. Thank you. And so to 6 you reported to 625, and I think your testimony was that you proceeded into the private drive. Is that correct? That is correct. And you testified the private drive winds back to the house. Where is the Monenhigh Bridge? The Monenhigh Bridge, where it crosses this private drive, is right here. That was a bad question. Where does the Monenhigh Bridge start? It starts in this area right here. And it start at a place that it is at the end of the trail, what we commonly refer to as at the end of the trail. That is correct. And it proceeds across the Deer Creek, is that correct? Correct. And it proceeds all the way past the private drive? That is correct. And if you know, this may be an unfair question, if you know which way does the water flow? It should be flowing this way. And so to the northeast would be upstream. Is that fair? Yes. And to the southwest would be downstream. Correct. Okay, so you went to the private drive. The private drive, when it gets to the Monenhigh Bridge, tell me about that area. So this area here, of course, you can't see it. The bridge is very high in the air. This driveway is underneath it. Although we're looking on top, this bridge is much taller. The driveway goes underneath it. So the private drive goes underneath the Monenhigh Bridge? That's correct. Now, even though the Monenhigh Bridge crosses the Deer Creek, it is much longer than the span of the creek. Is that fair? That is. So again, point out where the Monenhigh Bridge starts. In this area here. And where does it end? All the way here. Okay, and so when you get to the private drive, what do? I get out of my police vehicle there and show me where. Right here. Okay. And so I would say on the northeast side of the Monenhigh Bridge, right, underneath, I don't know why they keep writing underneath of it, unless that's how he's pronouncing it or saying it, which is grammatically incorrect. So right underneath it. Okay. Is there anybody with you? No. Okay. So you're by yourself. Correct. As you're doing this, are you reporting to dispatch what you're doing? I believe so, yes. Okay, so you get to that area. What do you do next? I get out of my police vehicle. I look around this general area just right in here. How far away from your vehicle would you estimate that you looked? Well, my vehicle was always in my sight. It was not very far. What is the terrain like there? It's woodsy, very wood-like. And you said the Monenhigh Bridge is up above you at this point? Yes. Okay. Did you yell? No. Did you yell out, Abby Williams, Libby German, anything like that? Did you turn on your sirens? That was a lot of questions. No. Did you turn on your lights? No. How long were you outside your vehicle looking? I don't recall. 30 minutes, 3 hours, 5 to 7 minutes. So you have two underage girls, teenage, preteen aged girls that may or may not have run into some kind of danger. You look for 5 to 7 minutes. That's all you give them. Okay. 5 to 7 minutes. After you got back in your cruiser, what did you do next? I proceeded up this driveway. If I can move this, you're getting the hang of it. I like it. Go ahead. Yep. Thought I'd save you some steps. So I got back in my police vehicle here, continued up this driveway, and went to this house. And who lives there again? That was Brad Weber. At the time, did you know Brad Weber lived there? No, I did not. You found that out later? Correct. When you got to the residence, what did you do? Yeah, so I walked up to his front door, knocked on it, made contact with him. I told him why I was out there. I was looking for two kids, and I asked if I could look around his property. Did he allow you to do that? Yes, he did. When your interaction with him, what was his demeanor? Normal, like anyone would be knocking on their door, so was he covered in sweat? No. Was he covered in blood? No. Did he look disheveled in any way? No. Okay, he allowed you to look around his property? Yes. If you'd continue to slide the picture over and tell me where you looked when you got to his property. So essentially, I asked him. He gave me permission. I walked down this way, out around this area, and that was about as far as I went. Are there outbuildings on his property? This here. And so that big building we see there in the picture, is that a barn? I assume so. Okay. I'm just recalling off the map. My memory doesn't serve, so that's fine. Did you walk around the barn? Not, yeah, in this area. I don't remember if I actually looped around it or not. Well, did you go inside the barn? No. Okay. Did you see anything that stuck out to you? I did not. Did you see the girls? I did not. After you searched that area, what did you do next? After I searched the area, I got back in my police vehicle, continued down the driveway. Other night shift units were coming on, and I believe, I went home. And so you went back down the private drive, back down now to 625, is that correct? That is correct. While you were driving out of this private drive, were you looking around? Yeah. Were you looking for the girls? Yes. Did you see anything? No. Now, do you remember what the weather was like this day? No. At this point in time, it was getting pretty dark, I believe. So this is 5:30, 6 o'clock? Yeah. When did your shift end? 6 p.m. By the time you got done looking at Brad Weber's, do you remember, was it after 6 o'clock? Yeah, I believe I may have stayed over. Again, just memory doesn't serve me. I definitely stayed after at least a half hour by the time that I got home. So, and when you left, was it dark? Yes. Okay. And on your way out of the private drive, did you stop and talk to Mr. Weber again? Not that I recall. Did you see anything as you exited the private driveway? No. And when you exited, did you come back on 625 heading north or heading south? Sorry. That is correct. And did you go back to town? Negative. I think I went home. Okay. So I did not go back towards Delphi. Okay. On your way down 625, did you see anything? No. Did you see the girls? No. Okay. At the time that you left work, it was after 6 o'clock? Correct. And you were getting updates as you searched and talked to Mr. Weber. Were you getting updates from dispatch on the location of the girls or possible location of the girls? Not that I recall. Were you able to gather any other information at that time? I was not. Judge, I don't have any other questions. Deputy, you can have a seat back up at the stand. Thank you. The court says, Mr. Rosie, Mr. Baldwin, Ms. Auger. Ms. Auger says, thank you, Your Honor. So we will be having cross-examination by Ms. Auger for Richard Allen. And she asks, Deputy Catron, is it Catron? Catron, yes, ma'am. Okay, when you went through ILEA, whatever that is, I'm sure it's Indiana Law Enforcement, whatever, training. You were taught how to investigate crimes, correct? Yes. And you're taught to pay close attention to details. Yes. Survey areas for evidence? Sure. And that continued in your field training? Yes. Okay, and so the call originally came in at 5:17 p.m., correct? That's what the report says, yes. Okay. Yep. Is there any reason to believe the report's wrong? That's an interesting question. No, he says. Okay, and you pretty quickly then left the dispatch center where you were. Yes. And I believe the dispatch center is at the sheriff's department. It is. Okay. How far? I'm directionally challenged. That's okay. How far west of the Hoosier Heartland is the sheriff's department? Oh, half a mile at best. Okay, can you recall what time you left the sheriff's department to go to the High Bridge area? Simply guessing, I would say maybe 5 to 7 minutes after I hung up the phone. Okay, so we're looking at 5:22 to 5:25. That's, yep, best recollection. Pardon? Best recollection. Yes, ma'am. And how long did it then take you to get out to 625? I'd say 3 minutes. And why did you decide to go to the south end of the High Bridge? So, I have previously been to the Weber property. Wait, he just said he didn't know who Brad Weber was, but now he's saying he had previously been to the Weber property. Okay, who's lying? Is he lying? Did he forget? So I have previously been to the Weber property for a criminal mischief report to a chicken coop, and I knew the area and I knew that that driveway went underneath that high bridge, so I thought that'd be a good place to check. He said he did not know that Weber lived there, but apparently he had been there previously for criminal mischief report about a chicken coop, whatever that means. Use your imagination. All right, so now, was it daylight when you first arrived out on where 625 meets the High Bridge? Yes, it was becoming dark, but there was still daylight out to sea. And on February 13th, you said it was wooded, right? Yes. And there wasn't leaves on the trees, were there? Not that I recall. Okay, so you had decent visibility in that area? Yes, yes. Okay, now you got to the High Bridge at 5:47. Is that correct? That sounds right. Yes. Okay, and I'm looking at is that from what you know as the CAD report? Yes. Okay, and you spent 5 to 7 minutes searching all over. Is that right? Around the bridge that crosses the driveway. Yes. Okay, you didn't go down the hill to the bottom of the bridge, did you? I did not. Okay. Are you listening? Correct. Was he not paying attention? She means, and you're listening, like at the time, you're listening for noise. Correct. Okay. And uh, you you did not see anybody, I think is what she meant to ask. He says he did not. And you didn't hear anybody. I did not. Okay, and then you went on down the access road. Would you mind coming down? No, absolutely. So you started here? Yes, I came in this driveway here and drove to here was my first stop. All right, and how far is it from your first stop here where the access road meets the high bridge to the Weber house property there? That far, which I mean, eighth of a mile around there. Okay, not very far. Not very far. All right. And you got back to your car to drive down to the Weber property. Is that correct? That is correct. All right. And while you're driving down that access road, you continue to look. Yes. Right? And when you're on this access road, can you see over Deer Creek, across Deer Creek? You can see over that direction, but I can't see water to my recollection. Is that because the access road is higher and by the time you kind of angle down to see, you can't really see the water here? That's because of the terrain. In my memory, that's how it was. All right. So, right on the north side of the access road, that's a pretty far drop down to Deer Creek, right? To my best recollection, yes. Okay. And so you think that you can see over here? You can see the wooded area, yes. All right. And again, no leaves on the trees. Correct. Decent visibility? Yes. Right. And you don't see anything? No. All right. And deputy, keep your voice up, please, says the court. The witness says, yes, ma'am. Maybe I'll stand over here and you can yell that way. So, where did you park at the Weber residence? Parked in his driveway, right in this area somewhere. And when you parked, did you look at all over here? As I was driving up, I was looking out sideways. Okay, and when you first got out of the car, did you hear anything? I did not. Did you stop to listen? Always listening. All right, that's part of your training, right? Yes, ma'am. All right, and you didn't see anybody, is that correct? Correct. You didn't hear anything? No. All right, and so then you walked up to Mr. Weber's door? Yes. And how long did you speak to Mr. Weber? A few seconds at best, a minute tops. Didn't it wasn't a long exchange? It was not. Okay, and he gave you permission then to look around the property? Yes. All right, and to the best of your recollection, can you show us with your finger where you went? Yes. So my car was parked here, went next to my car, and I walked down this direction, looked in this area. Okay, looking up this way. All right, and you did not go into the outbuilding here, correct? I did not. And it looks like this is another outbuilding. Yes. You did not go into that outbuilding. I did not. And how long were you there at the Weber property? I don't recall. Okay, now at, I believe, 6:16, you advised check along the trails on private property. Is that correct? If that's what the CAD sheet said, then yes, ma'am. Okay, and where were you then? What does that mean? If I announced that I was checking on the trails on the private property, then that would have been when I was on this lane somewhere, whether I was just driving down it or had gotten out of my car within that time frame. I was either driving down the trails or getting out of my car at this point. Okay, at 6:18. If that's what the CAD sheet says, yes. Okay, would it refresh your recollection if I showed you the CAD sheet? Absolutely. Deputy Catron, I'll show you your defendant's Exhibit C, which is the CAD report. Okay. Does that refresh your recollection? Yes, it does. Okay, I'm going to take it back. Okay. Are you done? Yes, okay. All right. And so at 6:18, you were on the trails east of the High Bridge. Yes, the trail. Checking the trails means I was on the private drive. Checking this is what I was calling the trails. Okay. So the high bridge is what I was calling the trails and what I was checking. I was either driving my vehicle on the private drive or out of my car underneath the bridge at the time. All right. Now at 5:47, you were at the Monon High Bridge. So if you're there again at 6:18, had you already been out to the Weber property? No, no, I would have stopped there first and then gone to the Weber property. Okay, and you stopped here at 5:47? Yes. And then you went to the Weber property? Yes. And then you were back here at 6:18. I don't know what works out with the time frame for for radio traffic, but I drove down the private driveway, stopped at the High Bridge, went to his house. Okay. As far as the exact minutes and times, I don't know. All right. Now, how they're how they're entered into the CAD report is that you calling in and telling them what you've done? I would assume so, yes. All right. And you think you left about 6:30? Yes. It was in that area between 6 and 6:30. Okay. Around that time. Now, how long did you spend searching at the Weber property? And when I say Weber property, this is all Weber property, but yes, I'm talking about either this field and the buildings there. Is that fair? Yes. Again, how long it takes me to walk out of the car, walk around here, it wasn't an extensive amount of time, so within the, 5 to 10 minute range. Okay. And then you left going back out the access road. That is correct. Okay. And you're still observing. Yes. Are your windows down? I don't recall. All right. You didn't see anybody. Correct. All right. And did you stop again here on your way out? Not that I recall. All right, you can sit back down. Thank you. Now, oh, can you come back down? Absolutely. I'm sorry, not a problem. When you come off the top of the high bridge, were you ever up? I have never been on top of the high bridge. Okay, so do you know where it goes? If there's a trail that continues on? So my understanding is that it goes out here and just diminishes, that there's no further trail that's designed as the trails or the bridge. Okay, all right. Well, then I didn't need to bring you down here. Okay. I'm sorry. That's all right. I won't do it again. Now, you're aware that during that evening, after you left and went home, there was a very extensive search. Is that right? So when I went home, I knew the other units were looking. I was not made aware of the magnitude of people that were coming out. And was it when you left at about 6:30, was it dark? Yes. Did you see any flashlights? I did not. You also, after February 13th, you were pulled off of road duty. Yes, that's correct. And you worked up the tip line. Yes. Okay. And that consisted of receiving tips and going out and investigating them. I apologize. So I did not do any phone calls on the tip line. It was simply tips that we had received previously, and I went and followed up on those. Okay. Do you recall how many tips you followed up on? I do not. It was several. How long was that your job to follow up on those tips? It wasn't a full year. I would say several months out to the year. I don't recall how many months it was. And did you ever investigate any tips related to Richard Allen? I did not. Did you ever hear of any? No. I have some questions that are probably outside the scope of direct. Do you want me to call him back? Judge, may we approach? Says Mr. McClellan. The court says, sure, go over here. Sidebar conducted. So Mr. McClellan says, Judge, I don't have any problem with her doing those as long as they're relevant to what we're discussing at this point. Ms. Auger says, relevant to what? Mr. McClellan says, what we're discussing at this point, the part of his job. Oh, no, 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 no. Mr. McClellan says, the tips, leads. Miss Auger says, just courthouse security stuff. Mr. McClellan says, how is that relevant to the guilt or innocence of Richard Allen? Miss Auger says, I think it's relevant in that it brings, we're going to be talking a lot about the circumstances of his detention and whether he can have private conversations with his attorneys. That's about 3 questions. Mr. McClellan says, in that deposition, there was a lot of focus on that, especially about why can't we have something inaudible, and I don't see how that's relevant to this deputy, and I would object to any questions involving that, Judge. Court says, yeah, I don't know how that's relevant. Of course, she sides with Mr. McClelland immediately. Ms. Auger says, oh, well, that's our presentation will be the circumstances of his detention and how that has led to the deterioration of his physical and mental state and the circumstances surrounding these incriminating statements. And what does that have to do with him? Well, because the court says, is he a jailer? Ms. Auger says he is in charge of courthouse security, and so it's his job. Court says, well, courthouse security is different from jail security. Ms. Auger says, we can make an offer of proof. The court says, okay, are you done with him then? Mr. McClellan says, no, I've got a couple follow-up questions. Just 2, really. Court says, okay, and then we'll be done for the day. Mr. McClellan says, yeah. Miss Auger says, sure, because she's not going to win that round. The court says, okay. Sidebar conference concluded. The court says, all right, Mr. McClelland, you've got any redirect? Mr. McClellan says, yes, Judge. Thank you. Just 2 questions. All right, Mr. McClellan asks, Officer Catron, I'm going to have you stay on the witness stand, but at any time while you were driving out of Weber's driveway, that private drive, did you ever stop and go down to the creek and look in this area? No. Anytime you looked in this area, was it from your vehicle? Yes. And is it your testimony here today that you didn't see anything in this area? That is correct. Is your testimony here today that since you didn't see anything in that area, or since you didn't see any bodies in that area, that there were not any bodies in that area? Is that your testimony today? I did not see any there. That is my testimony. So you didn't see any, but your testimony is not that they're just because you didn't see them, they weren't there? That is correct. Objection asked and answered. Mr. McClellan says, I don't have any other questions, Judge. It was kind of underhanded. The court says, all right, thank you. Maybe not underhanded, but a little sneaky there to try to make them think that potentially being just untruthful, or not untruthful, but um, that McClellan is kind of misleading. That's what I meant to say. Sorry, my brain stopped thinking for a second. All right, we are going to have the court says, oh, I'm sorry. The court says, thank you, officer. And then Ms. Auger says, oh. Court says, oh, I'm sorry. She was just going to send him off without a chance for the defense to ask some more follow-up questions, which they are going to do. Ms. Auger says, may I? The court says, I'm sorry. Yes, you may. Thank you. Ms. Auger says, so 5:47, you're here. Is that right? Yes. Okay, and you spent 5 to 7 minutes looking here. Yes, as best as my memory serves, yes. Okay. I wrote sometimes. 5:17, I'm sorry, so from 5:22 to 5:25-ish, you're here. Yes. Okay, and as you're driving down then between 5:30, about 5:30 would that be right? Yes. Okay, here. You and spent 5 to 7 minutes here again. Yes. Okay, so we're at 5:35 to 5:37? Yes. Okay, and then we go back down the access road about 5:40. Yes. And you don't see anything here at this time. That is correct. No further questions. The court says, does anybody on the jury have any questions for the officer? You have a question? All right. If counsel would approach, please. A sidebar was conducted. The court says, this is the question. Is it common for people walking the trail to stop and turn around at the high bridge, or does the trail continue on to the ravine on the north side of the river? Mr. McClellan says, that's fine. I'm okay with that. The court says, that's fine. Ms. Auger says, I don't know that he can. Mr. McClellan says, he'll be able to, he'll be answer that it. He'll be answer it. That's what the transcript says. Ms. Auger says, what? The court says something inaudible. Ms. Auger says, I don't think he can answer it, but I don't want to keep the jury. I don't want to. Court says, want me to couch it if you know? Um, Ms. Auger says, if you know. Would that be acceptable? Yes. Mr. McClellan says something. We know the court reporter didn't hear. She says, just have a seat. Okay. Yes, Judge, he says. Court says, that way it doesn't look weird. Whatever that means. What looks weird? I don't know. The sidebar conference is concluded, and now we have a juror question. All right, so the jury question was read by the court. Court's who says that? Okay, question of the jury was read by the court. All right, deputy, if you know, is it common for people walking the trail to stop and turn around at the high bridge? I don't know. Any follow-up questions, Mr. McClelland? No, Your Honor. Ms. Auger? No, Your Honor. Does the trail continue on to the ravine on the north side of Deer Creek, if you know? I do not know. Any follow-up questions, Mr. McClelland? Judge, just a point of clarification. So now we've got some follow-up from Mr. McClelland. My understanding of the question, Deputy, is that is there a trail that continues down to the creek instead of going into the high bridge? Do you know, is there, if there is or not? Not to my knowledge, no. Ms. McClellan says, okay, all right, thank you, Judge. No other questions. Ms. Auger? No. All right, thank you, Deputy. You may step down. All right, thank you, ma'am. All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a long day for you. And we're going to go ahead and call it a day, but we're not. We're going to go into the next witness. So, she sends them home, and the bailiff says, all rise. The jury leaves. Then court says, you may be seated. I know the defense talked about two offers to prove up here at the bench. The last offer to prove, Ms. Auger, you wanted to talk about court security. I'm not sure what that has to do with this detective. And have you resolved the issue about the deposition for the other witness? Mr. McClellan says, I would defer to Ms. Diener on that, Judge, on the deposition issue. Court says, okay. Ms. Diener says, so it's my understanding Mr. Baldwin offered to admit the deposition of Anna Williams related to an offer of proof. Will there be any explanation as to the subject matter? I don't have an objection based on what I believe it's for, but Mr. Baldwin says it'll be a part of a later attempt to argue that the motion in limine should be related to the third party suspects should be looked at. Reconsidered? Yes. Okay, the state has no objection to admitting the deposition of Anna Williams for that purpose. The court says, okay. Now I want to know what Anna Williams had to say in her deposition. If it has to go to third party, it'd be interesting to know what she said. Mr. Baldwin says, may I approach Judge? The court says yes. Mr. Baldwin says, Judge, I'd move to admit defendant's Exhibit B, which is the deposition of Anna Williams from August 30th. Court says, okay, I'll show defendant's Exhibit D. She means B, exhibited without objection from the state for purposes of your offer to prove on the third party perpetrators. The court says, may I ask a preliminary question before I begin reading this evening? Was this information presented at the hearing in August? No. Court says, okay. Mr. McClelland says, Judge, I would also move to, I'm sorry. Mr. Baldwin says, Judge, the court says, no, he said it wasn't admitted at the hearing, so this is brand new evidence on your, Mr. Baldwin says, yes. The court says, offer to, on your motion in limine. Mr. Baldwin says, yes. That's her deposition that was from August 30th, so it was just a few weeks after the motion. The court says, no, the motion hearing was July 31st to August 1st. Right. The court says, so this could not have been presented prior. This is August 30th, Judge. The court says, I understand that this is August 30th, but you had, oh. The court says, this information previously? No, I did not. I did not. Okay, so that is your offer to prove then. Mr. Baldwin says yes. On Ms. Williams, so she does not have to be recalled as a witness? Mr. Baldwin says no. Court says okay. Mr. McClelland says, Judge, just one housekeeping matter. The picture that we stipulated to, I think it was State's Exhibit 5. I'd like to formally admit that at this point and have your court reporter mark this exhibit. Court says, oh, thank you. Yes. That was the digital. Mr. McClelland says it was in the back of the TV, Judge, and I want to make sure it's housekeeping. I marked it so I don't forget. So court says, okay, thank you. Nothing further then from the state. No, Judge. At this point, no, Judge. Okay, all right. Mr. McClelland says, thank you. The court says, and then you wanted to have an offer to prove on the deputy that just testified? Ms. Auger says, Your Honor, we're going to defer that until probably our case in chief. Court says, okay. Ms. Auger says, thank you. Court says, all right. All right. Is there anything that we need to discuss on the record before the media has demanded access to your exhibits? And I've given them 15 minutes at the conclusion of the day to view the exhibits that have been submitted. Obviously, that's sufficient. Obviously, the digital examination, they've seen that, but there are some paper exhibits in the maps that I've given them the authority to come up and review. So when we go off the record, before we do that, is there anything else from the defense? Mr. Rosie. Mr. Rosie says, Judge, if I could just have a moment with the court off the record about a kind of housekeeping matter. The court says yes. Mr. Rosie says that we talked about earlier. That'd be great. Court says okay. Mr. Rosie says thank you. Anything from the state? Not from the state's perspective, Judge. All right, then we can go off the record, Jody. So that was that. They go off the record on that day. Now we go fast forward right into the next morning, which is October 19th, 2024, not 5 of 2024, so October of last year. The court says, all right, well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are back on the record in the state of Indiana versus Richard Allen. I'll show the defendant here is in person with his attorneys. The state is here by the prosecutor and his deputies. All of the jurors are back. And is the state ready to proceed? Mr. McClelland says, yes, Your Honor. The court says the defendant ready? Yes, ma'am, says Mr. Rosie. Court says, let's bring in our jury, please. Bailiff says, all rise. Thank you. You may be seated. Court says, thanks, Jason. Thank you, Jeremy. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just such a nice judge. It's nice to see you back this morning. I just wanted to give you a minute there to kind of settle in and get your things together. I'm glad you're finding the ability to get yourselves comfortable over there. I know the chairs aren't the greatest in the world, so I appreciate that you've had the opportunity to make yourselves comfortable. I hope you had a pleasant evening. The attorneys have indicated they are ready to continue. Mr. McLeland, you may call your next witness. Remember, the jury is sequestered at this time. They are staying in hotels. They are away from their family members. They're away from their phones. They don't have phone access except at like certain times of the day when they're like court supervised to be able to, have family calls on like the weekends or whatever or in the evenings. But that's about it. Like they are very limited right now. They're sequestered. This is just getting started. And they are, I'm sure, already kind of annoyed with the fact that they have to be doing this. Anyways, Mr. McLellan says, "Thank you, Your Honor. The state of Indiana will call investigator Stephen Mullen, please." The witness is sworn in. Mr. McLellan says, "Thank you." Mr. Mullen, before we start, I'm just going to remind you to speak up as low as you can. I know we were having some issues with the microphones yesterday. I want to be able to make sure that the jury can hear you and also that people at the defense table and myself. Fair enough? Yes. Okay. Will you state your name, please? Stephen L. Mullen. And Mr. Mullen, how are you employed? I am currently the investigator at the Carroll County Prosecutor's Office. And how long have you been employed in that position? Since January of 2020, so this is a relatively newer position compared to since the crime. So the crime, he was not an investigator at the Carroll County Prosecutor's Office at the time of the crime. So prior to that, were you employed as a law enforcement officer? Yes, I was. And how long have you been a law enforcement officer? Since 1983. And did you go through any kind of special schooling or training to become a law enforcement officer? Yes, I attended the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy in Plainfield, Indiana, back in 1983. And do you attend annual training seminars to update yourself on investigation techniques, new technology, anything that pertains to law enforcement investigations? I do. And do you do that on an annual basis? Yes, I do. In your capacity as the investigator for the prosecutor's office, what is your role? Mainly, I follow up on cases that the prosecutor's office is investigating and handling. I organize and make sure evidence is handled properly so we can prosecute the case. For lack of better words, you're our tech guy. Is that fair? I do that too. So you set up computers, organize digital data, set up the TV for us. You do all those technical aspects that are needed in my office. Is that fair? So he's the tech guy that he calls when his email's not working. He needs someone to fix it. Ay, ay, ay. Yes. Okay. And I want to take you back to February 13th of 2017. At that time, how are you employed? February 2017, I was the chief of police in Delphi. So he had a pretty important role in this investigation to begin with. And how long had you been the chief of police as of February 13th of 2017? Since April of 2014 up until the point where I was employed by the prosecutor's office. So from 2014 to 2020. And I want to talk a little bit about that day. Were you on duty that day? Yes, I was. And what was a normal day and routine activity for you as a chief of police in Delphi? As chief of police, I supervised the officers who worked at the police department, made sure that the reports and paperwork were completed, and also followed up on whatever was going on that day. And it was simply a routine day that day. Well, what shift did you routinely work? I would normally come in around 7 o'clock, 7:30 a.m. a.m., right, and then finish my shift around 5, 5:30. And did you do that on February 13th, 2017? Yes, I believe so. After you went off shift, what happened? So I completed my shift around 5, 5:30 or so and went home. And that's when I arrived home. I began hearing radio traffic concerning two missing girls. Now, is it typical for an officer in law enforcement to carry their radio with them and have it on after their shift? Yes, I do that often. So it's typical for you at least. Yes. Okay, and so you heard that two girls were missing. What did you do next? The next thing that happened was I received some text messages concerning the two missing girls from citizens that were in our community, and I became concerned and then contacted dispatch and talked to them about the situation and learned that there had been two girls had been dropped off at the entrance to the Mears Trail or the Monin Trail and had been missing since around 1400 or so that day. And what is 1400? I'm sorry, 2 p.m. And did you find out the girls' identities? Yes, they were Libby German and Abby Williams, both of them 13 of age. Libby was 14. Mr. McClellan says, Judge, I'm going to ask permission for the witness to approach what's been marked previously as State's Exhibit 5, which is the map on the TV showing the area we're going to be talking about. The court says he may. Investigator Mullen, I'm going to ask you to step down to the TV and we're going to go a little bit old school here, Mr. Mullen, because everything I tried yesterday, high tech, failed. And so I'm going to give you this pointer to point to different reference points that I'm going to ask you about. Mr. McClellan says, and Judge, I'd ask permission from the court to publish to the jury. I've printed out a hard copy of State's Exhibit 5. I've provided that to the defense as well, and I'd ask permission from the court to publish to the jury so they can make notes of it. And as a fail-safe for the technology, just because it didn't work very well for me yesterday, so I'd ask permission to do that now. The court says, you may. Mr. McClellan says, and Judge, I'm going to move these exhibits. Okay. Mr. McClellan says, I've been told by the bailiff that the jury's having a hard time. The court says, okay. Seeing the screen, is that better? Okay. Is that? Yeah, it's better. Thank you. Mr. McClellan says, can the jury now see the screen? Okay. And Judge, I may stand back here just so I don't block the defense. Okay. Mr. McClellan says, and hopefully I can project my voice enough where the court reporter can see me. See you? Hear you? Okay. Investigator Mullin, I want to get back to the report. Uh, was the girls were missing and they had entered, and where was it they entered? Our understanding was they entered at the Mears Trail entrance. Can you point that out on the map? Yes, this is the Mears farm, and hence we call this entrance for the trail the Monin Trail, which is located right here, the Mears entrance. And are you sufficient enough on that screen where you can zoom in and out a bit? Sure. Okay. Maybe, there we go. There we go. Okay. Thank you. Will you point out the Mears entrance again for the jury so they can get a better view of that? Right here. And the information you had gathered at that point was that the girls had entered that entrance? Yes. Oh, what other information did you have? They had been dropped off there and they had not returned when someone came back to pick them up. Once you got that information, what did you do? At some point then, I went into the sheriff's department, went to dispatch, and tried to assist in whatever way I could in order to locate the girls. And you can have a seat back in the witness stand, please. Thank you. And in your effort to assist, did you reach out to the Delphi Community School Corporation? What is that? I did. I had several phone numbers for the officials at the school in my phone, so it was very easy for me to contact the school officials, principal, guidance counselor, and see if I could locate some friends or acquaintances of the girls so that we could perhaps find out where they had gone. Whoops, I didn't mean to highlight that. So they can just call up the school and get private information from about the girls? Like, I don't like that. You can just contact the school and get potentially private information about the girls, talking to the school officials, principal, counselors. I don't like that. That I don't like that. I don't think that they should just be able to release that to anybody, but whatever. Okay. Not without like parental consent or something, I would think. Anyways, all right. And after you did that, what did you do next? Well, one of the things I did next was I began making those photo calls to try to find someone who might know where they were at, and then I spoke with different people who were out, maybe searching for the girls and trying to find out where they may have gone to. Was there a command center set up at this point? At this point, it was the Sheriff Lesenby, who was leading the charge of trying to find the girls. And so, you remember his name, and he's going to come up some more for sure. We've talked about him before. So Sheriff Lesenby, who was leading the charge to trying to find the girls, and so I simply talked to him and assisted in whatever way I could. Being chief of police, I tried to assist him in any logistics that he might need. Did you participate in any of the search that was done that day? I did not participate in any of the search myself. I never left the sheriff's department to go out to the trails, nor did I go out on the trails before I went to the sheriff's department. Where did you post at, or where did you stay at while the search was going on? I was in dispatch at the sheriff's department. And did you stay there the entire day of February 13th? Yes, I was there the entire day up until 2 o'clock or so p.m. a.m. Excuse me. So 2 o'clock a.m. on the 14th? On the 14th. Okay, is that when the search ended? Yes, shortly before 2 o'clock a.m. we ended the search. And at the point that the search ended, what were you investigating at that point? Two missing girls. The information was that they were on the trails, had not returned. Most of the searchers had their, most of the searchers out there were looking for maybe someone who had been injured. We had no idea anything nefarious had happened to the girls. That's a weird statement. When girls are missing, don't you think like there might be foul play? But he's like, no, no, we didn't think anything wrong. We were just looking for some injured girls. You're an officer. Like, you've seen some crazy stuff. You should be looking for the worst and hoping for the best, right? I mean, prepare for the worst, hope for the best. Anyways, that's a weird comment, in my opinion. And so, at the end of your shift, which would be 2 a.m. on the 14th, you used the word nefarious. Could you explain that a little bit more? He thought it was weird. He was in the middle of a different question. He was like, "No, wait a minute. You just said nefarious." When you left the shift, or when you left the dispatch, or sorry, let me back up. When you left the sheriff's department at 2 a.m. on the 14th, did you think anything bad had happened to the girls? At that point, I still believed that given time, they would probably return home. I just, at that point, couldn't imagine someone had done any harm to them. How would you know? You're an officer, sir. You know bad things happen to good people, even in small towns. So these are odd answers to me. When did you come in next? In the morning. When you left in February 14th at 2 a.m., which is technically in the morning, when did you come back in? At about 7:30 a.m. I arrived at the police department And at that point, the girls were still missing, becoming more concerning, I thought. And so, with that information, there had been social media had been pretty active about the girls being missing. And so, there were a lot of people who showed up to find help, or to help find, sorry, to help find the girls on the trail. My brain transposes things. And what did you do at 7:30 that morning? I met with the volunteers who were there, people from the community who wanted to go out and search, and produced a map to them, some of them, and also gave them my phone number to call. At that point, was there some kind of meeting point or command center set up? Yes. At the Delphi Fire Department at that time was located inside the city building, and so we met at the fire department. And tell me about the procedure of people that tell me the procedure of what happened when people would come forward and want to help search. Well, we took names of individuals and wrote them down on a sheet of paper and recorded and some phone numbers, I think, but mainly their names and gave them information, a map about where to go, perhaps. And so during that procedure, you were giving the searchers maps, and were you directing them where to search? I was not directing them at all. I think the chief of the fire department, he was help assisting that aspect. I didn't really direct anybody where to go. Do you know where the search party people were directed to go and look? Obviously, we were going out on the Monin Trail in that area. As far as sections and areas where different teams were supposed to search, I didn't command that. And I'm going to ask you to approach the map again, please. And can you point out to the jury what your understanding of what areas the searchers were searching? So that evening and the next morning, the searchers were predominantly looking downstream. If something had happened to the girls, perhaps they had fallen or become injured or come into the stream. They were searching downstream. So the search would encompass the area here along up and to the bridge. I think there was some searching on this side of the bridge, on the Weber side, and I think there was also some searchers that went to this area here, which is kind of a flat area up on the top. And when there's a valley, when there's a valley, there's a flat area. It's a sharp incline or falling area, which I don't think anybody crossed this line. And I have to remember that we don't have a jury from Carroll County. And so I want to put in the context, some of the landmarks that we're going to use when we ask you some additional questions. So, first of all, I'm going to try this. If you could grab a pen and denote on the map where the city of Delphi is. City of Delphi is located over here. And if you could denote that with an X, please. City of Delphi is in this area and in that direction. And so, would that be to the west of the Monon High Bridge? Yes, it would be. And then you denote the Freedom. Can you denote the Freedom High Bridge? This here is the Freedom Bridge. And the Freedom Bridge crosses, it looks like a divided highway. What highway is that? The Hoosier Heartland. We've talked about the CPS building. Can you denote that on the map, please? Yes, the CPS building is located right here. And we've talked about prior to this, the Mears entrance. Can you circle that on the map, please? Mears entrance is located right here on County Road 300 North. And can you label that as 300 North as best to your ability? Yes. Thank you. Can you also denote the Monon High Bridge? Yes. This structure, which is located right here, is the Monon High Bridge. So that area there. And the section to I'm gonna say northwest, is that commonly referred to as the beginning of the building, blah, 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 as the beginning of the bridge? Yes, this would be the beginning of the bridge. Can you put a B on the map, please, for beginning? And then where would where would be the end of the bridge? This area here on the other side. Could you put an E, please? And he does. Thank you. And where is Deer Creek? Deer Creek flows this direction. It's the body of water that comes through town. And just keep speaking up a little bit. Yes. And you answered my next question. Which way is the creek flowing? It flows from east to west. And can you put an arrow on the creek pointing to which way it flows? He does. Thank you. Now, while you're there, there's been some testimony about the Hoosier Harvest Store. Can you locate that on the map? Hoosier Harvest Store is here. I put an HH. Yep, that's fine. Located here. Okay, all right. Okay, so tell me again, to your understanding, where were people searching for the girls? On the following day, on the 14th, the search began to encompass this entire area, but the evening prior to the 14th and even early in the morning, Mr. Baldwin says, Judge, may I ask a preliminary question? The court says you may. Mr. Baldwin says, Sir, you said a moment ago that you used the word thought, and they didn't go past a certain point. I mean, you also testified that you were at the police station when the search was happening, correct? Yes. Mr. Baldwin says, so you don't know where anybody was other than through hearing other people, I suppose. Is that correct? Yes. Mr. Baldwin says, I object to this speculation as to where people were searching. Mr. McClellan says, I'll move on, Judge. The court says, okay. McClellan continues his questioning and says, Investigator Mullen, you can have a seat back at the witness stand, please. Thank you. On February 14th, you were assisting at the fire station with setting up or at least sending out the searchers. Is that a fair statement? Yes. And did you do that the entire day of the 14th? Yes, I remained at the police department. And so you never went out and assisted with the search on the 14th either? No. I want to draw your attention to around 12:15 on the 14th. What happened then? At around that time, I received a phone call on my cell phone from Pat Brown, and he told me that hold on just a minute. Can't say what and what information or what did you find out from that phone call? Who did he hear from? Pat Brown. Okay. And what did he find out from that phone call? Well, he had he had located two bodies. And what did you do next? I remained at the police department, informed the officers who were around me, and they left the city building to go to the area where he had said that he had found the bodies. And were you notified of where he had found the bodies? Yes. And I'm going to ask you again to approach the map and, to the best of your ability, where is your understanding of the location of where the bodies were found? He said that the bodies that he had located were south of the Morning Heights Cemetery, which is located right here. If you could mark it on the map, use the pointer. I'm sorry. Sure. The Morning Heights Cemetery? The Morning Heights Cemetery. Okay, and your information was the bodies were found where? South of this location and somewhere close to the creek. Can you put a circle where your understanding of where the bodies were found? What he told me at the time, my understanding was somewhere in this vicinity. Okay, all right. You can have a seat back at the witness stand, please. What did you do after that? I remained at the police department, fire department, and sometime around 2 o'clock, we met with the members of the family who were still at the fire department slash police department. I don't know why he says both each time. And they hadn't gone anywhere. So, members of what family? Of the families of Abby Williams and Libby German who were present at the fire department during that day. And why did you meet with them there at the fire department? Myself Indiana State Police Public Information Officer Kim Riley and the chaplain met with them to explain to them more precisely we had located two bodies and we were at this point trying to make identification. And what did you do after that? I remained at the police department, and around 7 o'clock, I got a phone call from an individual, Tom Mears. And did you gather information from Mr. Mears? Mears told me that he knew that the Hoosier Harvest Store business had a set of cameras. They had security cameras at their location, which focused towards the roadway on 300 North. I'm going to ask you to approach the map again, please, and if you'll grab the pointer, I know it's circled, but can you point out for the jury the Hoosier Harvest Store business? This is the Hoosier Harvest Store business owned by Dan and Kathy Pennington. And you'd gathered information that they had security cameras? Yes. Did you go to the business location? I did. And were you able to view the security cameras? Yes. The Penningtons met me at the location and we viewed the video that they had on their security cameras. In which direction, the security camera you viewed, which direction was it pointing? The security camera was located around at this point, and it had a view that went directly out to the roadway on 300 North and then panned to the right, or panned to right about here. Can I draw a line? Yes, if you would draw a line, I guess a field of view that you were able to see from the security camera. The field of view was straight down the edge of the building, that's a little bit off, and then out towards this direction, maybe a little closer to that. But this is within the field of view of the camera. And did you view the security footage? I did. And were you able to see 300 North? Yes, I was. And what time span did you look at? We looked at a short period of time, mainly sometime roughly daylight. Any daylight period of time was where we could see, obviously, cars. If it was dark, we couldn't see anything that was on the road. It's not visible in the dark. So mainly from around 8 o'clock, I think, until 5:30 or so, 6 o'clock. So 8 a.m.? Yes. And you viewed the security footage all the way through what time? Around 6 a.m., when it began to get dark and we couldn't see anymore. You mean 6 p.m.? Did I do it again? Sorry, 6 p.m. Excuse me. All right. And while you're viewing the security footage, what are you doing? I used my cell phone at that time to take some pictures of the vehicles that were traveling on the road. And what was the intent of that? To preserve the information and make sure that we had pictures of the vehicles, some of them at least, so that then we could go back and try to collect the video. How long were you there at the Hoosier Harvest Store viewing that security footage? We were there probably 45 minutes to an hour. Okay. You can have a seat back at the witness stand. Thank you. I want to fast forward to 2024. Remember, the crimes are in 2017, so um, there's a big gap in time in this investigation, as we know. We saw drone footage from a prior witness, and I want to talk about that drone footage. Can you describe to the jury how that drone footage came about? Yes. Worked with the Tippecanoe County Sheriff's Department, and they brought their drones up to the photograph the area. We actually took the drone footage on February 13th of 2024. So the anniversary. Bizarre. We did it at that time because that was the best representation of the foliage. Okay, so that makes sense. That was in the area back in February of 2017. However, it's 5 years worth of growth and things and whatnots, and or 6 years, whatever it is. I can't do math, but you know what I mean. Um, so 7, whatever it is. God, my brain. really recovering from this migraine. I just learned too today that there is something called like a migraine hangover, which I definitely get. I've gotten migraines my whole life, and I get the hangover, which is probably the worst part of it for me. And I've been getting them my whole life, and I never knew that's what it was called. And it was a real medically diagnosable thing. It's actually called a post dome or something like that. I don't know. But anyways, the technical term is not hangover, migraine hangover, but that is what it's referred to as. Anyways, so the only differences were the improvements made to the bridge and the trail, and I can't do math. So years later, the foliage is different, but they're saying that it's the most representative of that time, which it probably is, but they're doing it, way out. And they're doing it after all the renovations have taken place on the bridge. So the drone footage is not accurate. Next question. And that drone footage, or at least part of the drone footage you took, is what was displayed to the jury through Kelsey German. Yes. Was there additional drone footage taken? Yes. Was there drone footage taken from the Freedom Bridge to the Monon High Bridge? Yes, there was. And was that taken at the same time? Yes. Mr. McClellan says, Judge, I'd like to play that drone footage now. It's 9 minutes, and so the state's going to move to admit that drone footage. What I'd also like to do, Judge, is to take a screenshot of this and admit it as an exhibit, as State's Exhibit I. State's Exhibit, I think 7. I thought it was the letter I. State's Exhibit, I think 7. And also, while they were watching the drone footage, I'd ask the court leave to print this out. We can print copies for the jury to publish to the jury. Court says any objection. Mr. Baldwin says no objection. All right, without objection, 6 and 7 are admitted. McLeland says, and so, Judge, we'll need just a second to get that queued up. Court says, do you need to help him? The witness says, I feel like I do, Judge. The court says, okay, he feels like he needs to help you. McLeland says, I feel like he does too, Judge. Thank you. Mr. McClellan, as we have learned, is not very technically savvy as he's been struggling with technology ever since opening statements. Literally, right before opening statements, he couldn't get a video playing. Ms. Auger says, I think you need to go back. Mr. McClellan says, Steve, referring to the witness. The court says, you're not done. The witness says, oh. And the court says, get back there. Next question. So I'm going to have you narrate to the jury what we're seeing in the drone footage. Okay. Oop, you fast forwarded it. Okay. Okay. And where are we at now? This area here you're looking at right now is the beginning of the trail. The trailhead pretty much was the same as here as it was back in 2017 without the improvements to the lane, which I believe started back into the area where they now have paved. Now you're referring to this as the trailhead? Trailhead. That's not what we've heard in the past from other witnesses. Where is this on the map? This is located at Freedom Bridge. So this is the beginning at Freedom Bridge? Yes. And that is the bridge, I guess, that was farthest west on the map. Yes. Okay. The blue bridge over Hoosier Heartland, he says. Go ahead, if you could start the video again, please. This kiosk was not there as well then. And where is the drone footage moving? Where is it going? It is moving along the main trail towards the high bridge. And so, is this an accurate representation of what you would see if you started at the Freedom Bridge and worked your way down the trail towards the Monon High Bridge? Yes, it is. Okay, except in 2017, this was not paved. It was all gravel. And this was done when? What date was this done? This video was taken February 13th, 2024. And I want you to allow the video to run, and can you point out When you get to the Mears entrance, yes, this fence was not there at that time. I need you to speak up just a little bit. You're not mic'd up, so everybody has to be able to hear you. The witness says in 2017, this barrier or fence was not there either. I would ask in your narration as we move along if there are other aspects that were not there in 2017, if you could point those out to the jury. Just try to get an indication of what was there and what wasn't there in 2017 as opposed to 2024. Are we approaching the Mears entrance at this point? Very close. Were there benches on the trail back in 2017 that we see there? Yes. To your knowledge, all the benches that we've seen on that video, were those also there in 2017 as well? To my knowledge. Okay, just go ahead and let it play. Is this the Mears entrance that we're coming up on now? Yes. And Mr. German testified about going straight down to the creek. Is that the trail? Can you point that out, please? Yes, I can stop it real quick. Okay. It'll be easier. Go back just a little bit. I'm sorry. That's okay. Go ahead and let it play. But the trail that we just saw to the right was the trail that Mr. German was speaking about. Yes. From the Mears entrance to now, where are we still headed towards the Monon High Bridge? If my bearings are correct, we are moving towards the High Bridge from the Mears entrance. Okay, and now we're just coming into view of the High Bridge entrance. And in 2017, did the entrance to the Monon High Bridge look like it does in this video? No. What improvements have been made since 2017? Well, since 2017, they've installed a deck area, making it easier to walk out on the bridge, safer, and the railing on both sides, and the kiosk that's located here. And I think that's concrete. There's concrete that leads from the paved black-topped area to the deck entrance. And how long does the deck entrance go into the bridge, out onto the bridge? I'm not sure exactly, but maybe 100, 150 feet. Okay. And then after that improvement, what does the rest of the bridge look like? It is the unimproved area that they would have seen back in 2017. So the section of the bridge that we're coming up on now, the unimproved section, is that more indicative of what the entire bridge looked like in 2017? Yes. Okay. So now, which section of the bridge are we entering onto? This is the original This is the original area of the trestles ties that we're looking at the top of the bridge, on the top. Now, I notice a platform there. Uh-huh. Were there other platforms throughout the length of the bridge? Yes, there are. Do you know how many there were? I don't. Now, I can't say for sure, but I think there's 3 or 4 of these situated along the area between the improved section and the end of the bridge. Are they all on the same side of the bridge? No, they're on different sides. As you can see, one is on the right-hand side and the other one's on the left-hand side. And this section of the bridge would have been what the entire bridge looked like back in 2017. One caveat, at that time, that area was not as well groomed over, or is not as well grown over as here now, because you aren't able to walk out onto the bridge. At least they don't do it near as much. At that time, it was more cleaned off. People would break the limbs off or whatever it was, that tree, they'd break it off to, I guess, cross the bridge. So there was more traffic on the bridge in 2017 as opposed to today. That's what I believe because you can see there's limbs and overgrowth in the area was not there then. You're from Delphi, Indiana, correct? Yes. You graduated from high school here? Yes. Lived here your whole life? Yes. In your experience with your life here in Delphi, what kind of people typically would cross the bridge in 2017? And I'm going to specify that a little bit. Would adults typically cross this bridge? Some. Who are more inclined to cross the bridge back then? Teenagers, younger people. I'm going to ask you to pause the video for a moment. Sure. Teenagers, younger people, is that correct? Yes. So we've come to the end of the bridge. Where are we seeing now? This is the end of the bridge, and we're facing towards the east, and this is Weber's Drive that goes underneath the bridge and back up to Weber's house. And this end of the bridge, after you get to the end of the trestle, would that be the beginning of Weber's property? Yes. Okay. I ask you to play the video again, please, or play the remainder of the video. And that is Weber's Drive that we're seeing underneath the bridge. Yes, that's correct. Have a seat back at the witness stand, please. Judge, at this point, I've already moved to admit it, but I'll just submit to the court reporter State's Exhibit the video 6. And then at the next break, Judge, I will print the photo that we plan to exhibit or entered exhibit, State's Exhibit. I think maybe court says 7. Yes. Sorry, Judge, I can do that now, but I can do it at the break or at the next break if that would be uh, a more efficient time. We can do it at the break, she says. Judge says, McClellan says, Judge, I don't have any other questions. The court says, Mr. Baldwin? Thank you, Judge. Mr. McClellan says, Mr. Baldwin, do you want this left? Do you want this left? You? What? Do you want this left you? I'm reading that right, right? Do Mr. Baldwin, do you want this left you? Maybe. I don't know. I appreciate it, Nick. Whatever whatever the question was. Mr. Baldwin appreciates it. Very odd question, but cool. Mr. Baldwin, for the defense, says, now, just so everybody knows, you were involved in the investigation of the deaths of Abby Williams and Libby German from the very beginning. Yes. And all the way up until even a few days ago, correct? Yes. The search you called off at 2 a.m., is that what you said? Shortly before 2 a.m. Shortly before 2 a.m. And that's before 4:33 a.m., is that correct? Yes. About 2.5 hours before 4:33. Yes. Thank you. On the 13th, I'm sorry, on the 14th, were you aware if there were dogs that were going to start searching around the area of the cemetery, if you know? I don't know. I'm sorry. Well, there were some. Are you aware if there was any interest about searching around the cemetery area south of the cemetery at some point in time? Later on the 14th. I appreciate that you did that on February 13th. At least that's similar representation, but you would agree with me that things changed quite a bit in a lot of different ways since 2017, correct? Some. Some. You testified to some of that. There were improvements to the bridge, right? Yes. Improvements to the beginning of the trailhead near the Freedom Bridge. Yes. Some railings you saw up there. Yes. And you also, I think, stated near the end of your testimony that there was more overgrowth and brush along the Freedom Bridge, I'm sorry, the High Bridge, as the drone went over it. Is that correct? Yes. So visibility back in 2017 from the bridge, either east or west, would have been better in 2017 than what we saw today, or in 2024, perhaps. And even at the end of the Weber property, it was less overgrowth than in 2017. Is that true? Than in 2024? That's my understanding. And the trees were smaller and they grew over the course of 7 years. Yes. So the best representation of what it actually looked like, and again, I appreciate that. I think it helps the jury out, but it would have been it would have been 2017 videos and photographs if these things exist. Yes. So the best representation would have been if you had taken it in 2017. He agrees. Yes. Mr. Baldwin says, no other questions. The court says, Mr. McClelland. Mr. McClelland says, I don't have any redirect. Judge, thank you. The court says, all right. Does anybody on the jury have any questions for Mr. Mullen? We've got one here in the front. Oh, and in the back. All right, counsel, if you'd approach, please. So we've got a juror question. So this is a sidebar where the jury cannot hear, and it is just the attorneys and the judge speaking. So the court says, what was the thought process of looking downstream? That's the question. Uh, and Mr. McClellan says, okay. Mr. Baldwin says, yeah. Court says, could you please provide clarity? This is question number 2. Could you please provide clarity on where the bodies were found? Was it near Deer Creek or the creek reservoir that runs north-south from Morning Heights Cemetery? Mr. Baldwin says, that's fine. The court says, next question, was the drone moving at a pace equal to a normal walking pace? Would it take approximately 9 minutes to walk from the trailhead at Freedom Bridge to the end of High Bridge? So they're thinking, was that drone footage sped up, slowed down? Could you walk it in that time? They were thinking that. Mr. McClellan says, is that one question? Both are together? Mr. Baldwin says, I think it can answer that, but that's no problem. It'd be a quick walk. Mr. McClellan says, yeah. So sidebar is concluded. Okay. Juror questions of Steve Mullen. So now this is in front of the jury. And I'm assuming this is the court speaking. Sir, what was the process? This transcript has so many errors and it just keeps messing me up in the reading of it, so I apologize. Sir, what was the process when looking downstream? Thought process. Thought process. God damn it. What was the thought process when looking downstream? Mr. Mullen says looking downstream from the bridge area was the possibility that they may have fallen off the bridge. If I'm understanding the question correctly, that the girls may have fallen off the bridge. As I understand, it's about 63 feet at the highest point, so a fall like that would have injured someone if they'd fallen into the creek and gone downstream. So we were looking downstream to see if they were there somewhere. Court asks, any follow-up, Mr. McClelland? No, Judge, thank you. Mr. Baldwin? No, Your Honor, thank you. Next question. Could you please provide clarity on where the bodies were found? Was it near Deer Creek or the creek reservoir that runs north and south from Morning Heights Cemetery? The witness says the bodies were found along Deer Creek, but off north of Deer Creek in the area south of the cemetery. North of the creek, south of the cemetery, I guess. Without going to the map, it's difficult to, he says, and he trails off. And the judge says, why don't you go ahead and approach the map? He says, certainly, and answer that question. Mr. McClelland says, Mr. Mullen, here's the pointer, sorry. Mr. Mullen says, could you repeat the question, Judge? Yes. Could you provide clarity on where the bodies were found? Was it near Deer Creek or the creek reservoir that runs north and south from Morning Heights Cemetery? I'm not sure if I understand the creek reservoir, but the bodies were found right in this area here. So I'm not sure where they're referring to at the creek reservoir. Any follow-up, Mr. McClelland? Mr. McClelland says, yes, Judge, please. So, a little follow-up by Mr. McClelland. And he asks, Mr. Mullen, I'm going to ask you to zoom in on the map and I want to give the jury some more clarity, but I want to ask a couple questions before that. Did you actually go to the scene? I did not go to the scene where the girls were at this time, where the girls were at the time that they were there. So he didn't go to the scene when the girls were at the scene. So he's visited the crime scene post after the cleanup and everything, after the bodies had been removed and no longer a crime scene. And so you were not able to give an exact pinpoint of where they were found? No. But you know the general area? Yes, I do. Okay, you zoomed in on the map, is that correct? For the record? Yes. And I'm going to zoom back out a little bit. And can you point out the cemetery? I'm sorry, the name has escaped me. Morning Heights Cemetery. That is Morning Heights Cemetery? Yes. Okay, I'm going to zoom it out for the record. Whoops, my light just fell out of nowhere. Sorry. I'm going to zoom it out for the record a little bit more. And what is the road that connects to Morning Heights Cemetery? This road along this location here is County Road 300 North. This is Morning Heights Cemetery. And the question talked about a creek reservoir. Is there a creek reservoir that runs from Morning Heights Cemetery down to the Deer Creek? I am not familiar with the term creek reservoir. Is the topography such that Morning Heights Cemetery is above Deer Creek? Yes. The area here at the creek is lower. I don't have an exact foot number or a calculation, but it is, well, Morning Heights Cemetery is higher than the creek is, as far as the topography goes. And it seems like from the picture, and there's some kind of ditch or ravine running this way. Is that true? Yes, as far as I'm aware, there is some sort of erosion area here, but the deepest part of the gorge or valley runs in this area here. And now that we have the map zoomed, can you point out the area of where the girls were found? My understanding is they were located right in this area there, right here. Were they in water? They were not in water. And that, my friends, is a question that I have because originally they were reported in water, and there's some above aerial footage that looks like there's some bodies floating in the creek. And then the story changed. So, or that report was never repeated. It was, I don't know. It's an interesting. I've talked about it on my channel before, and it's very interesting that there were the location of the bodies. Just keep an eye out. Listen to the testimony about where the bodies were found because multiple people may say different things. I'm not sure. Let's find out. So they were not in the creek. Correct. They were on the dry land. Yes. Mr. McClellan says, okay, I don't have any other questions, Judge. The court says, any follow up, Mr. Baldwin? I do, Judge. So Mr. Baldwin says, and where the girls were found is in a flat area, correct? Yes. Okay, and I would correct that. Not exactly flat, but it was more level than some of the other areas out there. Okay, and you've been to the Weber property? Yes. And can you point out where that is? Yes, this is the Weber home. This is the Weber Drive. Have you been at the Weber home? Yes, I have. And the Weber property, the Weber home is up here, and where those girls were found is down here, correct? Yes. And from the Weber property, you can see the area where the girls were found from his patio. Mr. McClellan says, Judge, may I ask a few foundational questions? I'm going to object to that question. Court says, yeah, go ahead. Mr. McClellan says, did you ever go over to the Weber property and look over to the area where the girls were found? Yes, I did look over in that area, but I wasn't able to see. When did you do that? I think on the 27th of February. It was in February of 2017. 2017, yes. And were you able to see where the girls were found? I was not. Okay, I guess I'd withdraw the objection, Judge. The foundational questions answered Mr. Baldwin's question. He asked, would you be able to see? I'm going to object to that question. I'm okay with the question. Could you see? Court says, sustained. Could you see the area? Maybe not where the bodies specifically were found, but generally see in that area where the bodies were found? I was not. Thank you. No other questions. The court says, you may step back there. Mr. McLeland says, have a seat back up there. The court says, retake the stand. There's a couple more questions. So, more jury questions here. All right, so the question is, was the drone moving at a pace that would be equal with an average walking pace? This was not an additional question. It was just a continuation because we had three questions and we didn't get to the third. Um, Mr. Mullin says, thank you, Judge. Good question. So, when we did the drone footage, I wanted them to move at a pace which was similar to one walking down the trail. Now, is it an adult walking? Is it a teenager walking? There's some variation there. So, the original footage we had was 1 times. We multiplied it by 2, so it looked more what it would be like when a teenager was walking. It may have moved a little fast. It may have moved a little slow. It was difficult to mimic exactly that particular speed. Any follow up? Mr. McLeland says, so the video that we saw, that was 2 times, you say 2 times speed? Yes. And that was fast paced 2 times the original speed of the drone footage. That's right. Am I saying that correctly? Yes, you are. Okay, all right. I don't have any other questions. Mr. Baldwin, no, Judge. Thank you. Would it take approximately 9 minutes to walk from the trailhead this is the next question, from the trailhead at Freedom Bridge to the end of the High Bridge? The witness says, somewhere in that vicinity, I suppose, give or take maybe 2 minutes. Okay, any follow up, Mr. McLeland? No, Judge. Mr. Baldwin? Mr. Baldwin has a follow up question. He says, so 9 minutes you think it took from the Freedom Bridge. Most people 9 minutes to get from Freedom Bridge to the High Bridge. The court says, no, the question is to the end of the High Bridge. Mr. Baldwin says, oh, I'm sorry, from the beginning of the High Bridge to the end of the High Bridge. The court says, no, the question is, would it take approximately 9 minutes to walk from the trailhead of Freedom Bridge to the end of the High Bridge? Mr. Baldwin says, okay, thank you, Judge. So you believe that, give or take 2 minutes, it would only take 9 minutes? Just a guess. At this point, you have to take into consideration the nature of the bridge and whether they want to go quick or slow, given the spacing between the rails. I'm sorry, it's hard to guess. That was the speed we did the drone at. Even from the Freedom Bridge to the beginning of the High Bridge, you would think then that that would take less than 9 minutes. Is that what you're saying? The original footage was 20 minutes. Okay, thank you. Court says, all right. Thank you, Mr. McMullen. You may step down. The witness says, thank you. The court says, you may call your next witness, and we're going to end here. We're continuing on with more law enforcement going forward. So thank you guys for watching. I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye now.